There's one type of boat that buyers in the Mediterranean wave off with a shrug. It's just a dinghy. And it's exactly the type the Navy SEALs choose, along with British lifeboat crews and every Coast Guard in the world. When lives are on the line, nobody chooses anything else. I've been selling boats for 20 years. And I'll say something a broker isn't supposed to say. I think the market has this one wrong. People pay €1 million for a day boat that has to throttle back the moment the Mistral picks up in the afternoon. And the boat that's 200,000 cheaper, they walk straight past it. Today, I'll prove it. 3 numbers settle the argument. 2,000 kilograms, 23 degrees, and 2.2 G. We start with the people who don't buy boats for prestige. And at the end, I'll show you a dinghy that turns heads even in Monaco. Picture a procurement contract where the color of the upholstery is irrelevant. Only one thing counts: whether the crew makes it out and back. That's how navies and rescue services buy boats. The British RNLI runs the Atlantic 85 RIB. 35 knots in a Force 7. Force 7, the conditions where charter yachts stay tied up in port. The US Navy carries its SEALs in 11-meter RIBs. The spec demands it. The boat has to take repeated impacts of 10 to 15 Gs. The French SNSM. The Italian Coast Guard. Rescue crews on every sea in Europe. All of them on RIBS. This isn't a fashion. It's the conclusion drawn from thousands of missions. Now the number that matters to you. The high-speed craft code is clear. Above 1 G, spinal injury starts. And the average impact of a fast boat landing of a wave? 2.2 G. A hard one? Over 4. The military tracks it with DRI and VDV, spinal compression models. Because it's vertebral compression, not the enemy, that most often takes a crew out of the fight. Remember that. The best professionals in the world don't choose a boat with their heart. They choose it on a spinal compression figure. The first of the 3 numbers, 2.2 G, straight into your back, every time you come off a wave. The question is, what absorbs that energy? The boat's structure or your spine? The answer comes down to 2 things: how much the boat weighs and the angle at which it hits the water. And this is where the physics starts, the part you'll never hear on the showroom floor. Take 3 boats in the same class. Pirelli 42, 9 tons. Pardo 43, 11. Fjord 41 XL, 11.5. Where does that 2.5 ton difference come from? Tall laminate topsides, a heavy hardtop, glazing, joinery below deck. Everything that looks beautiful at the quay turns into momentum out on the water. The physics is merciless. The more mass, the more energy the boat carries as it drops into the trough of a wave. And all of that energy has to go somewhere, in a fraction of a second, into your knees and your lower back. The second factor is the angle. And here's something almost nobody talks about. In a moment, you'll understand why the bottom of the Pardo is shaped the way it is. It's no accident. It's a compromise you pay for with your back. Deadrise, the angle of the bottom. The Pardo 43 carries 16 degrees at the transom. The Fjord, 18. The Pirelli 42, 23. A 7-degree difference. Sounds harmless? The physicist Wagner worked it out back in 1932. Impact pressure rises in inverse proportion to the square of the tangent of that angle. In plain terms, a flat bottom takes the whole wave at once. A sharp bottom slices through it. So why does the Pardo have a flat bottom? Because it has to. 11 tons has to sit on something. A flat bottom gives stability at anchor and room for the IPS drives. It's a deliberate choice by the yard. Comfort at rest at the cost of comfort underway. The second of the 3 numbers, 23 degrees. The angle at which the Pirelli meets a wave. But angle and mass are only half the story. Because ARIB has one more thing no hard boat has. And that thing does something engineers call... Actually, see for yourself. Before we get to the tube, let me take you on a sea trial no dealer ever will. Morning on the Mediterranean. Water flat as a table. Every boat in the world feels seaworthy here. But in the afternoon, the thermal wind gets up, the Mistral, the Meltemi. The sea builds to a meter, 2.5, force 4 to 6. This isn't a storm. It's a standard Mediterranean afternoon. It takes just a few hours. A mirror in the morning, a washboard by the afternoon, and that's exactly when you find out what your boat is really made of. On heavy, flat-bottomed boats, the skipper backs off the throttle. The testers put it plainly. The structure shudders, and the skipper slows down to stop the pounding. The Fjord, with its wide bow, calls for, and I quote, empathetic driving. The Axopar 45, in a meter of sea, 30 knots, rock steady, without spilling the drinks in the cockpit. That's how a light boat with a sharp bottom and steps rides. And the Pirelli 42 treats those same conditions as a minor nuisance. The testers described it as a safe, level flight across the water. Same bay, same hour, same course back to port. Some come home up on the plane, others at half throttle with an aching crew. That's the real test of a day boat. The tube, 60 centimeters across, 6 independent chambers. Most people take it for a fender, a fat bumper to keep from scratching the marble in Porto Cervo. Wrong. It's the most active component in the whole structure. Engineers call it hydroelasticity. A rigid composite hull passes 100% of the impact energy straight into the deck, that is, into you. The tube flexes, by design. It works like a pneumatic shock absorber, the length of the entire topside, soaking up the heat before it ever reaches your spine. Second job, heel. When a rib heels over, the tube drops into the water and instantly adds buoyancy, right where you need it, at maximum beam. Then there's the center of gravity. A hard boat carries tons of laminate high above the water. On a rib, the laminate stops just above the waterline. The rest of the topside is air. I know what you're thinking. What if I hit the rocks and puncture the tube? Does my €500,000 boat sink like a leaky airbed? The Pirelli's tube has 6 independent air chambers. Puncture 1, and the other 5 hold the buoyancy. The boat keeps going. And it's no beach airbed. Hypalon and Orca are the elastomers used on military boats, built for scraping over rocks, for impact, and for years of full sun. The result? In real conditions, this boat is virtually impossible to capsize. Not because the builder says so, because that's how the geometry works. And that's exactly why rescue crews launch RIBs in storms that keep everything else tied up in port. It's not about courage. It's about design. All right, theory is behind us. Now the specifics. One boat that takes all this physics and turns it into something you actually want to be seen in. The Pirelli 42. 13 meters. The hull was drawn by Ted Mannerfelt, the man behind offshore race boats. This isn't a dinghy with a sofa bolted on. It's a performance deep V hull with 2 steps that feed air under the bottom and cut drag. On the transom, 3 Mercury Verado 400s, 1,200 horsepower. Now the numbers. From Sea Trials, not a sales brochure. Top speed, 49 knots. The Pardo, on twin 440 horsepower diesels, 38. Fuel burn at cruise, 120 liters an hour. The same as the Pardo, just at a higher speed. Base price, €499,000. The Pardo, from 700,000. And the detail that changes everything in a seaway. This boat is up on the plane at just 12 knots. You can back off in the chop and still ride over the water, not through it. Tank, 950 liters. Range, around 220 nautical miles. That's real passages, not laps around the buoy. And the draft, 90 centimeters. The Pardo needs 1.5 meters. The Fjord, almost 1.2. You slip into the coves, where they left anchoring offshore. The Italian press wrote about it, slicing through waves with absolute softness. At 63 knots, the hull seems glued to the water. A chase boat for superyachts. Yes, owners of 100-meter yachts, people who can buy anything, choose a rib as they tender. Ask yourself why. All right, if all of this is true, why are there hundreds of Pardos in the marinas and you rarely see a Pirelli? I promised honesty. Time for the other side of the coin. Look at any bay on the Côte d'Azur in August. How many of those boats are actually moving? The research is blunt. 90% of a dayboat's life is spent at rest. At anchor, a drink in hand, a swim off the back. And at rest, the Pardo wins. No contest. The tube eats up more than a meter of deck width. The Pardo gives you nearly a full 4.2 meters of floor and a cabin with 1.95 meters of headroom. A proper bed, a shower, shade under a big T-top. The Pirelli has a cabin you'd use for a nap. Then there's the psychology. For €500,000, nobody wants to hear nice dinghy at the dock. The Pardo, with its reverse bow, looks like the avant-garde. A rib looks like a workboat. Except that argument just died. The techno-rip Yacht made a move that has superyacht owners rubbing their eyes today. They built a MANSORY Edition. Yes, the MANSORY that reworks Rolls-Royces and Lamborghinis. Carbon on the hardtop, carbon throttle levers, quilted waterproof leather. 3 Mercury 500s, 1,500 horsepower. A limited run, unveiled in Dubai. So if it's about turning heads at the quay in Monaco, park a Pardo and a Pirelli MANSORY side by side and watch which one people reach for their phones over. The prestige argument now runs the other way. And here's the most telling evidence of all. The market has already quietly proven the RIB right. Nobody's just said it out loud. The Axopar, 7 tons, 20 degrees of Deadrise, twin steps. One of the biggest commercial hits of the decade. Look closely. It's a hard boat built to rib physics. Light, sharp, stepped. Everything I've been talking about for the last 15 minutes. The Axopar is a RIB without the tube, and buyers are ordering it sight unseen. Physics wins. Most people just haven't noticed yet. So let me tell you how I see it after 20 years. If your boat is a floating patio, anchor down, guests aboard, champagne, home at dusk over flat water, buy a Pardo or a Fjord. Honestly, they're superb boats for what they're actually built to do. But if you run the boat, really run it. Corsica for the weekend, Bonifacio when it's blowing, coming home at 6 when the Mistral's up and the bay looks like a washboard. Then come back to the 3 numbers. 2 tons less mass, 23 degrees of entry into the wave, and 2.2 G that the tube and the hull soak up, not your spine. The market prices prestige at the quay. Physics prices the way home. I know where I'm putting my money. If you want to know more about hydraulics platforms, you have a new video on your screen right now. See you on the water.